Welcome to See Beneath Your Beautiful, where guests share stories of adversity and perseverance, which inspire, encourage, and challenge us. We embrace these tough conversations, intimately exploring our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
Hello, my name is Reannan Keene, and gosh, it's weird to say, a title or whatnot. Currently a chef and owner for Izzy's Comfort Kitchen, but I think anything that is your work can be limiting. So, I'm a woman, a mother, a partner and wife, and a daughter, and all of those things. So, but my current space is dwelling within this industry that's been a part of my life for 20 years now.
Your restaurant is named after a daughter you lost. Is that correct?
Her name is Isabella Catherine Keene. She passed away on Thanksgiving morning of 2011.
How old was she? I don't really know your story.
She was our third child, and I was 40 weeks and 6 days pregnant. And I typically have what's kind of referred to as prodromal labor. And so it's where your labor kind of goes off and on for a couple weeks. Our second son, he was only 13 months old when we found out we were pregnant with Isabella. And so my body was still recovering. I was still nursing him. And it was a very difficult pregnancy just on my body. Mm-hmm. I hadn't had that time to recuperate and whatnot. So the kind of prodromal labor that I had experienced with my first two, my boys, it was seemingly more difficult. And I had a lot of discomfort at the end of that pregnancy. And I was kind of in and out of that labor space. It was a few days before Thanksgiving. My mother doesn't live here. She had come to visit for the birth, and my sister lived here. And so on that Tuesday, I had an appointment with my midwife. They'd been weekly, if not bi-weekly at that point, because I was ready to have this baby at any moment. Heartbeat was good. You do all the checks. They check your urine, your blood pressure, baby's heartbeat, all of that. And it was all normal. Been fairly normal the entire time. And, again, this is my third baby and kind of like going through the motions at that point. I think as women, we get in the space of, if I just get to 12 weeks, it's safe. Right. And I can start being excited. I can start feeling happy. I don't think anyone in any frame of mind, unless you've experienced or maybe been close to someone experiencing it, could ever wrap their mind around the idea that your baby could die at birth or shortly before birth. I think you can wrap your mind around complications that happen through delivery and whatnot, but it just wasn't a thought in my mind.
Right.
Not at least a rational thought. I had some dreams that were kind of telling, I think a lot of people do, and you shrug those off as fears and pregnancy dreams. So the next day was a Wednesday, and my sister was working at a restaurant here in town serving, and they served hot wings. And I thought, gosh, maybe these hot wings will get this baby out because I am just done. So we went out to lunch, and I remember sitting there, and Alexander, my second son, was sitting next to me, and Jason, my husband, was on the other side. And I had finished eating lunch, and there was a moment where I felt a movement that I had never felt before. And it felt as if her entire body stretched out and pointed in every direction of my stomach. And I even remember sitting there and saying, that was the weirdest sensation I have ever felt in my life. Again, this is the third baby. By the end of this pregnancy, you've kind of felt a lot within your womb. And I had never, and I would not ever feel that again, because I definitely didn't feel anything like that with my last pregnancy. I went home and something was just not setting right with me. I remember laying down and thinking, that's weird. She's so quiet. I'm pretty far along. This is what happens. They get real quiet, and then you usually go into labor pretty quickly because they're ready. They're having their little rest. And it's a common thought process, and it's a common thing. People say, well, my baby's not moving. And they're like, that's just what happens. 9 times out of 10, your baby's born within the day or 2 days or whatnot. So I kept kind of running that through the back of my mind of like the checklist of what was okay, even though I felt like something wasn't okay. I laid down, took a nap. I woke up a few hours later. I still had this sensation that just something wasn't right, but there were things to do. I still had a 13-month-old. I had a 5-year-old. And Thanksgiving, my mother was visiting. There's all this commotion around me that there really wasn't time to stop and think, what is so wrong over these last few hours.
Mm-hmm.
Later on into the evening, I was rocking my son to sleep, Alexander, and I laid him down and I came and I sat back down on the couch. It was about the time the news had come on, and I always watch the evening news. And that's really when she would get very active every single night since she started being active, around when they really start moving. And I sat down on the couch after laying him in his crib. And I remember I was sitting with my legs crossed and I was just kind of pushing on my belly, like, hello, play with me, like, talk to me. It's quiet now. And every once in a while, I could feel like a shift of movement, but it wasn't the same. But then there would be enough of her body moving that it felt like the same because you're full term.
Right.
You know that feeling when you're like, something's not right, but you keep shrugging it off because you really can't find an explanation as to what could possibly be wrong because the actual explanation is so beyond your comprehension that you just can't think of it. I ended up laying down and I thought, if I don't wake up in labor, I know something's wrong. And so this was about 12:30 at night, and I woke up 5:30 or so, and I just laid there, and it was like it just washed over me. And I just knew that it was dreadful. And then I looked over at my husband who was sleeping, and I thought, this is awful. He's just laying there sleeping, and I can't wake him up yet. It's not time to break his heart. So I thought, okay, let's be rational. Maybe let's get something to eat. Did you eat enough last night? Maybe you're just, all of these things. So then it's like panic almost. And so then I go into the kitchen and I get some juice and I wait a minute and and then I'm like more aggressively pushing on my stomach to feel more movement. And then I eat a piece of toast. I start kind of jumping up and down to see if like that will work. And then I just had a wave come over me that she was gone. And so I went into the bedroom, and that was a very long walk, knowing what I had to tell her father. And so I woke him up and I said, she's not moving. And I've done everything. I've tried everything. I'm going to call the midwife. And she said, I'll be right there. I laid down because I knew my husband was still, now he's at the beginning of this process of trauma and what that looks like. Well, let's do this. Let's do that. Obviously this isn't a thing. It's fine. Everything's fine. We're going to get to the hospital. We're going, like, she's going to come. She's going to check the heartbeat again. Then we're going to go right to the hospital and do like whatever we need to do. This is what's going to happen. When the midwife walked in, she said something to the effect of, are you ready to check? And she put the Doppler on my belly. And of course there was no heartbeat. I think that's when I very much lost it. That was the most dire amount of pain I've ever been in up and until I actually held her body after delivering her. The cause of death was that she had the cord wrapped around her neck 3 times, and she had 3 true knots in her cord. So she completely tangled herself.
Oh.
And that moment that I felt sitting in the restaurant, I believe, was her last movement. And I really believe that was the moment that her soul left her body.
Yeah.
Because then I began seeing her around me just as I had since I was 14. I knew her and named her and all kinds of things. So
how long after Isabel did you get pregnant with Lily?
I knew I was going to have a daughter when I was 14. I wrote her a letter naming her and telling her what kind of mother I hoped to be for her. I struggled with relationship with my mother, and I told her all these things that I just wanted to be for her and what I wanted her to have in life. I kept this letter for years, and my mother actually found it, the letter, maybe 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So I have it. It was one of those treasures that I never thought I would get back. I knew it existed. I knew it happened, but I never thought I would actually hold it in my hands. And so I started seeing Isabella's energy around me when I was very young. I would see a little girl with long, dark, curly hair in this little dress that she would show herself to me like that quite often, but she would she would be running out of the room. And I say these things because to understand it ties into the question of how long it was that I conceived Lily. A couple other times, the similar kind of imagery, I could feel her and I knew she was coming as if she was standing in front of me. I could smell her. I could see her. I could touch her. If I just could reach quick enough, I would be able to hold her. It was funny because I have a really good intuitive friend and she was like, I just feel like it's a bit longer. I just feel like, maybe like 4 or 5 more years and I see you with a daughter. It doesn't feel as pressing. And to me, I'm like, the hell it isn't. I know she's here. I can feel her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to the point where I thought the pregnancy test was wrong when I was the month before I was actually pregnant with Isabella. I was like, this is wrong. She's here. I can feel her. I went to the doctor, the nurse practitioner. She gave me an ultrasound because I couldn't believe that what I was feeling in my body wasn't her. It was that real.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm crying and like, you must think I'm crazy, all of these. She's like, no, you are not crazy. You were just very in tune with her and you're very in tune with your body. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're pregnant very soon because obviously you can feel this. Once I became pregnant with her that next month, then the dreams and the visions just got so intense and vivid. I had this one dream where I was in the desert. It was me, but it was also me pregnant, but it was me. And I was giving myself an ultrasound and I was sitting like in this big open desert, lying in, an obstetrician table. And I'm giving myself an ultrasound. And in the monitor was this image of 2 girls. Mm. And what was interesting, because even in my dream, I remember thinking, well, that's weird because usually if you're pregnant with twins, they're kind of in that yin and yang position. Mm-hmm. But this image was 2 mirror girls. And they were eye to eye, hand to hand, toe to toe, and they were just curled up like this beautiful little heart. And I woke up thinking, that's so interesting. Why would I dream of 2 girls? Why would they look exactly the same? Why are they sharing the same heart, the same energy? Why is this a thing? And I just remember thinking how interesting that was. We had, all this stuff done, testing and whatnot while I was pregnant, but I never chose to know the gender scientifically. But I named her. I bought her all her clothes. Mm-hmm. It was the greatest act of faith in me in believing what I had been shown and what I knew to be true without evidence. When I did choose to do the induction, then I started seeing her next to the bed. I saw her spirit next to me and I would feel her hand on me. So I chose the induction. I remember being upset because my labors tended to take very long and hers was very quick. It was barely 4 hours. And I remember thinking and being so upset that I didn't get more time. I was also upset that I felt like I needed to feel more physical pain to match the amount of emotional pain. Mm-hmm. And I felt gypped out of that because then it would make sense if I could feel that much physical pain, then I could wrap my brain around this soul pain that is shattering. I think I maybe pushed 2, maybe 3 times. The hardest part was the silence after when your baby's born, but there's no relief, there's no cry. Mm-hmm. I pulled her up to me and crying and crying and crying. And my midwife was there. The doctor was there. A nurse who's since become a great friend. But at that moment and I was like, well, what is it? My midwife. And she was like, you were right. It's Isabella. Then I completely lost it because then I thought this was the most unfair torture that I could have felt in my life. And so I laid there with her and I bathed her and brushed her hair and dressed her and, noticed every mark on her body and anything to lock into my brain of her. Their skin will start to peel and because they've passed away, their body is decomposing. There was a couple spots that I remember, but one on her abdomen just stood out to me so greatly. And it makes sense later on with Lily. But as I'm holding her and it's finally quiet and we're having those first, last, and only moments, I saw her come to the bedside. And, you've gone through labor, you've gone through delivery. I had lost a lot of blood. I had hemorrhaged quite a bit. And so I was very weak and hungry and all of the things. Even in that moment, knowing my soul, I questioned it because I thought I'm just delirious. I'm losing my mind here. But I could see her. And so delirious or not, I could see her. And she said, you'll only spend one birthday without me. And I thought, well, how's that possible? She's like, just one birthday, Mama. At some point, you have to say goodbye and you have to hand over their body. And there were no easy moments. Finding out she had died, holding her body, and then giving her body away were definitely the top three of torture.
Mm-hmm.
Then waking up in the morning and, you're in a labor and delivery unit. So you're hearing babies cry from being born, hearing women working through their labor. And, here you are with trying to stand and blood running down your thighs and angry and defeated. And the best way I've ever thought to describe it is lying bare on a battlefield, completely gutted and just hoping you'll die because nothing could possibly feel as worse as you do in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then simultaneously remembering you're a mother to two sons, you don't get that option. You have
Right.
to figure it out. You have to somehow heal your wounds and learn to live with the wounds that will never go away. Got home and then I'm getting angry because I'm walking in and now I'm seeing her everywhere. It's like her spirit's free and she's comforting and she's trying to, in my mind and in my faith, be that beacon of hope and faith. But I couldn't see it at that moment because I was so angry. I didn't feel anger at her. I don't think I ever could have. I just felt angry at God. I felt angry at the universe. I felt angry at myself. How did I not see this? I'm intuitive. I was so angry. We go home, you grieve, you plan a funeral, you write an obituary. She did have a reception and she did have an entire community that came to this funeral to rejoice in this space of honoring this person that lived for the shortest amount of time, but has an entire family that are grieving her. She was getting everything that she deserved.
Mm-hmm.
You get through the funeral, then the real grief starts.
Right.
Because there's nothing left to do. There's nothing left to plan. There's nothing left to give. Flowers are dying on the counter. The food stopped coming. It's time to do the hard part, which is to move through it and go on without her physical body. I had two boys. We did not have girls. I had not bought girl toys. I had clothes and things like that. But I was lying in bed and I all of a sudden started hearing on the couch or something. I can't remember. But there was something in the boys' room and it was this toy that started going off. And I thought, that's weird. I've never heard that sound before. You get pretty good ears as a mom. You know what sound is what, where it's coming from. And I walked and I'm like, where is this coming from? Well, at the very bottom of the toy bin was this like toy that was appropriate for, like a 1-year-old, this like little girl toy. I don't even remember what it was, but it just started going off and there were no batteries in it.
Oh, wow.
There were no batteries. I was like, how is this happening? How is this happening? And then I was like, okay, I know you're here. And then I sat for a moment and I thought, it's not that she's not here. It's you're too damn angry to see her. You can't see her when you're angry. Nothing's ever not present. It's where you are in the alignment with that you can see and be with that energy. And I couldn't be with her energy in the depth of my anger. Grief, yes. Anger, no. And so I had to work through some anger. As I went to lay down and I almost fell asleep, I felt her almost as if like a little one sitting between their parents. And I felt her lean over and kiss my lips. And it jolted me awake. And from that moment on, I never didn't hear her. I went through a long process of healing my body, got in the best shape of my life, moved through a lot of grief, got a different job, and really became a more fuller version of what was left from that process. I was standing in a thrift store and skeleton keys were very important to me. I wore one the entire time I was pregnant with Isabella because I'd read this old Jewish poem about keeping the gate locked until the birth of the baby. And so I wore one religiously. And then when she was birthing, there was a butterfly on the door. And in the hospital, that was signifying a loss. And so it had just become those two things is very much tied to Isabella, my daughter. And so I was standing and it was this beautiful giant showcase of skeleton keys. And there were butterflies all throughout them. It caught my eye and I just stood there. I was like, oh man, what a sign. You are right here. You are right. I can feel you. And then in that moment, I heard, turn around, mama. I want that one. And so I turned around and it was this antique yellow and white, beautiful little dress with a matching yellow and white hat. And it was like this sense of urgency, like, I want that one. That's mine. And so I bought it and I kept it. And we ended up doing pictures in it with Lily when she was almost right around 2. I think she had just turned 2 or was about to turn 2. It was definitely one of those moments of physical faith. Mm-hmm. I had always had a dream around 20 weeks with all of the babies that would tell me the gender. And it was right every single time. But it was always around, 18 to 20 weeks when you can get your anatomical scan. And I started having this dream, not even pregnant. And I had never had a gender dream outside of being pregnant. We had actively started trying to conceive a child about a year after Isabella passed. It was very important for me. No, it was about 17, 18 months because it was very important for me to let my body heal.
Yeah.
I needed to heal. Never had to try to get pregnant. Like, just kind of happened. It was like, let's have a baby. Oh, look, we're pregnant. Mm-hmm. We never struggled in that way. And my heart always aches deeply for couples that it's such a struggle. But for the first time, I couldn't get pregnant. I couldn't, no matter how many times I tried, it just wasn't happening. And that created a great frustration. And then May comes around and June comes around, July comes around, and every month you're just, October comes around and I'm thinking, I don't know what to think because she told me at my bedside I would only spend one birthday without her. And we're coming up on the second birthday. Mm-hmm. And I thought maybe I was crazy. Maybe I was delusional, questioning every space of my intuition and mediumship and all of those things with this process. And like I said, I started having those gender dreams. My mom and my mother-in-law both sent me, without knowledge, because they live on opposite sides of the country, a beautiful citrine necklace, which is the birthstone for November side 2. Mm-hmm. November comes around and the dreams are getting very intense. Isabella's birthday is November 24th. And her actual date of death is the 23rd because she was born, overnight. Mm-hmm. And so her death is before her birth. And so the 23rd is always more significant to me because that's the day she actually died. And so on the 22nd of November, I had no physical signs because, again, I had gotten in the best shape of my life to prepare my body for this pregnancy that I knew was coming. It must have been like 6 o'clock or so in the morning. And I went in the bathroom and I took a test and it was very quickly positive, very quickly positive. And I sat there and then I was transported back to that space of I would only spend one birthday without her. And as that pregnancy progressed and I scientifically found out it was my daughter, I knew that I hadn't spent more than one birthday without my daughter's soul. I've had intuitive nudges and dreams and reasonings as to the reasons for her passing and whatnot. And I don't know how it works. Even through the depth of pain of losing her, I was gifted something so monumental in her energy form and how she chose to be and leave and be and all of that, still through my own filter and my own understanding. I don't project that onto Lily. I mean, she said some pretty intense, crazy things memory-wise. but it's her life and it's her story. And the only thing I can own is my knowledge of it. So I only spent one birthday without her.
I hear what you're saying, that Lily's her own person, but do you kind of feel like Isabella's spirit is part of her?
I believe that I have one daughter, one soul. And when she came through me, when she showed herself to me, I chose to name her Isabella.
Mm-hmm.
And when she chose to leave, a part of that spirit, that name will always be her. I don't believe that the soul or the spirit dies. I just kind of think it keeps going, and wherever it hops in and out of, it just does its thing. And so all of those identities are very important and unique. But I think that, I have one soul of a daughter that happened to come twice.
I love that. Were you so nervous with your pregnancy with Lily?
Terrified.
Yeah.
So I had that moment of, okay, you kept your word. I'm not insane. Down to the day before, could we have been any more precise? There's a place in Spokane, they do like the early ultrasound and the 3D. And so you get like this video and it's really cool. And I had never done that. I knew this was probably going to be my last pregnancy. So I went, I even like fibbed a bit because you're supposed to be 16 weeks, 15 weeks and like 5 days. And I was like, I can't wait another day. Somebody look in here and tell me if I'm crazy. We did that. And at first she was like, well, it's kind of looking like, and I'm shaking. This isn't about being a boy or a girl. This is about me understanding my own intuition. She's like, it's kind of looks like a boy. And I was like, and I'm just laying there calm. And I'm like, I said, if there's a boy or if it's Lily, I knew that when she came this time, her name was going to be Lily. I just knew that. Just as sure as it was going to be Isabella the first time, though I didn't know it was going to be a first time at the time.
Yeah.
But I made my peace. I said, if this is a boy, this is your name. We love you. You are welcome. And I'm your mother. I can feel you. I can hear you. And however that works out, because I still feel him somewhere, but I physically cannot give birth again. But then she's like, are you sure about your dates? And I was like, well, it might be a couple days before. She's like, oh, no. She's like, it's a girl. It's for sure a girl. And then, of course, I'm like, I'm so excited. But then I'm like, oh, but maybe she's wrong because it's so early. I went out for, like I had said, the last meal I had with Isabella, I had wanted those spicy hot wings. And so after that early scan, I was like, we're going to get wings. Like, I'm going to full circle here. Into Toys R Us and bought a dress. We had the anatomical scan at the 20-week mark at the hospital. And the doc walked in and he was like, well, looks like you got your girl. And Jason, I just high-fived, went, nailed it.
That's cute.
Yeah, there was a lot of joy. Lily definitely, her personality has seeped through that pregnancy and the signs. And knowing her now, the strength at which she was communicating with me, because she gets your attention. She does not let you waver. When she was a baby, if I wasn't looking at her, she would grab my face, like, look at me.
Yeah.
I was terrified. There was a moment at 37 weeks where I felt like she wasn't moving enough. And I rushed to the hospital, chose to do an induction because I was terrified. I was like, I'm not going through this again.
Yeah.
I'm not going through this again. I won't survive if I go through this again.
Yeah.
Went through an 18-hour labor induction and didn't progress. And he gave me the option. He said, I can break your water or you can go home and wait. And I chose to go home and wait. There was a peace that came over me and I thought, I can't force her. No matter what, I cannot force this baby. She's going to come. I believe she's going to come, but I can't force her. And so, we did twice a week checks and things like that. And I got to 40 weeks and 6 days with Lily. And I had an induction scheduled because I was like, I can't go further than that. I'm terrified. It was 41 weeks exactly on the day of the induction. And I got ready. I was taking my sweet ass time because I didn't want to induce. I had already been through an induction. I wanted her to choose her day. I felt helpless, but I was like, I can't emotionally, spiritually, I can't go any further. We were delivering in Spokane again, and I wanted to get breakfast beforehand. And so we walked into the old European cafe. And as I was getting out of the car, I had a really strong contraction because, again, I have this off and on again labor. but it was like a real one. Like I was like, oh, that's like a labor contraction. Okay. I happened to look at the time. It was 7:00 on the dot. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see. And then I walked in, was greeted at the host stand, and I took one step and I felt a gush.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that's weird. And I really, because it never happened. My water never broke before my labor. And I thought, did I just pee my pants? And I took another step and then more. And I was like, oh. And Jason was like 10 feet ahead of me, ready to sit down. I'm like, Jason. He walks. I was like, come here. And he's like, what? And I said, I think my water broke. He was like, oh, do we need to leave? And I was like, well, I don't want to sit down with wet pants.
That's funny.
So we go out to the car and I couldn't stop laughing because she chose her day. On the way at the last minute, once again, she chose her day, that no matter what happened, my body and her worked together, and she chose the day that she was going to come back into this world on her terms.
I photographed Lillian. She's adorable. And I love all of the posts you share of what she says. How old is she now? I know she's 7. Funny. She's 7.
7. Yes. Yeah. She is a wonder.
Mm-hmm. She's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
I was nervous to have this conversation with you because even though I keep doing it, I still don't know what to say or what's okay to ask. And so, what do you want people to know that it's okay to ask you about? I just love that you celebrate Isabella, like that it's not a secret. You share your grief about it. I really admire that. Do friends ask you the right things? Is there something you wish they would ask? What do you want strangers to know? It's a real hard conversation, though I wish it wasn't. I wish death was easier to talk about so we could go through it with you.
Yeah.
The pain that you're feeling. And so what kind of things can we help people understand about, especially this kind of pain, which I don't know anything worse.
I think that there was a beautiful gift that I received after Isabella passed, and it said, wife that loses her husband is called a widow. A husband that loses his wife is called a widower. A child that loses their parent is called an orphan. But there's no word for a parent that loses their child because the grief is that deep. And I think that what has been helpful through the years is bringing up her name or talking about her doesn't remind me of the pain. The pain is always there. What it does is it makes me feel a little less alone. It makes me feel seen, that she is remembered. What is the most difficult is the absence of speaking about her, especially through what I kind of consider her time. And every so often through the years, her birthday is back on Thanksgiving. And of course, that's even more compounded when it's at that time. When you go through grief and you're in that space of death and the reality that that carries, nothing else matters the same way. Things that used to bother me before her passing, the perfection of this, the perfection of that, kids having clean clothes all the time or whatever it might be, it just stopped mattering. I think in conjunction with what people can say or not say, because there's been some hard things that people have said, well, you still have other children, or she's in a better place, or you can have another one. You do get to a point where you're like, they just don't know any better. People try to say things to comfort themselves. And I learned this through training as a doula, that the primary way to hold space for someone is to allow them to be where they are without the need for them to comfort you through your discomfort of their process.
Yeah.
The longer I've grieved this process, the less I've needed or desired from people's comfort, though it is wonderful and beautiful. I also just stopped caring. I stopped caring whether or not someone validated my process. And now I have an entire business and restaurant that celebrates the energy of fate in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And that you might have absolutely no understanding as to why, but beauty can arise. And I think that when you align with the depth of your soul, you feel like it's going to be okay. You feel that space of alignment. For instance, the first couple of Novembers, I felt like I was always having to justify my need for space.
Mm.
I was forgetful because it takes you right back into that space.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, every November since it gets a little stronger, my need for space. I don't make a lot of plans. I don't commit myself. I used to, and then I would feel terrible, but then also as I kind of deal with some codependent tendencies and wanting to make other people happy and this people pleasing empath that is a great part of me, but was very unhealthy years ago. Now is, I'm sorry that this is difficult for you to understand, but I'm still going to take this space anyway. And then to actually not feel guilty.
I love that.
And every November, I get a little stronger in that. And so what then I met with, because I believe in the law of attraction, is being surrounded by people who get that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they don't, one, I guess I don't care anymore anyway, because I did some work in that part of my own mental health space. But because I don't, then I'm also surrounded by people who do. In this arena that I'm working in right now in the restaurant and celebrating, and November's a very special time, and it's her month, it's her time, and magic happens, and we have some of the most beautiful guests that just happen to find us for the first time, and lots of Isabellas end up coming to the restaurant in November. It's not on accident. It's a perfect coincidence. And just know that when you go through this, you probably are going to say the wrong thing, but owning it and just going, I'm probably saying the wrong thing. I just love you. How can I be better for you? What can I do for you? And also knowing that they might not have an answer. They might not have a way to articulate their needs. And sometimes just trusting your own inner wisdom. And if you just know that that person needs a flower, just put some flowers on their porch and walk away. You don't need to be comforted by the reception of that gift.
Mm-hmm.
All you need to do is follow your heart and trust your instincts. And I would say that's the best part. Most people are genuine, loving, kind, caring human beings that just maybe don't know what to say. There is this space of women now and families that are more capable or willing to talk about these losses, but our mothers and grandmothers, they were not to talk about it. No, the sheer amount of older women in their 60s and 70s that I've met that are carrying around this burden, it just amazed me that the feeling was so raw because they never were allowed to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And so the burden that they've carried and the markers left on their energy and soul and physical body and the lines of their face of where it's etched is just overwhelming. And so this is a space that I will always share. And there's no questions that are off limits. I've been judged awfully for being open and honest about my thoughts. And I would say if they could have burned me at the stake, they would have. I probably was in another lifetime, but I just don't care. I don't care because it's my daughter. I want other mothers and fathers to feel that.
I had a medium over at my house. I had a girlfriend here that I was very close with of 10 years and started to talk to her about the child she lost at childbirth. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know that. And I was good friends with her for 10 years. This girl was very hard-edged and she was crying and saying she had 2 sons after the loss of her baby. And she always felt guilty for loving her sons. That's one of the reasons I love that you talk about it. Because 10 years I was this woman's very good friend and didn't know about this pain and burden she was carrying. And I just really appreciate that. I know that about you and I hardly know you. I mean, we're Facebook friends and I just really appreciate that. I appreciate your boldness and your willingness to hold a place for her in this world. So thank you for that. I feel like I get to know her through your story. So thank you for that.
Oh, that's humbling. Thank you.
I'm so sorry for your loss
Thank you.
and so happy that you're celebrating her. I told you I lost my mother when I was 18, and I also think about her death date more than her birth date, which I find interesting, but it's just the day everything changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything to offer people about having gone through a loss, how to live your life fully? Because you are doing that. Is there any words of wisdom that you can share with people who are suffering through a loss?
I struggled with talking for much of my life. And that came from a lot of hardship in my childhood where I wasn't allowed to talk, and at times forcibly not allowed to talk. And, as an empath, I didn't really know that word until I was in my mid 20s, and truly, didn't really feel that word or understand that word until my early 30s. And so what I was gifted was the ability to speak my truth and my feelings with respect and regard for not only my integrity, but for those around me. And it didn't always happen that way. There were quite a few missteps. And, when you're not allowed to talk, sometimes it comes out with a vengeance. And it comes out like a fire breathing goddess that's just on the war path to destroy so that they can recreate. So after the burnings of the late 20s in my life, I learned how to just know after she passed that no matter what I said, nothing was going to hurt worse than her dying. No one's damning me to hell for my beliefs. No one calling me a charlatan or a witch, or which I'm like, okay, I'll take that title. I go by kitchen witch now. So, but I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that 11 years ago. I wouldn't have brazenly acknowledged my soul for what it was out of fear of judgment, rejection, and that lack of being held by who you thought you needed to be held by. I learned how to hold myself, and that the universe was the best holder of all. Lean into the hard and meditate.
I love that. I don't think I spoke until I was 15 years old. And so having this podcast, I can totally see what you're saying about finding your voice and trusting that you have something to say. I really like that you said that. Thank you. I was just curious, only because I've offered to do this for a company, curious if you had photos taken of Isabella.
My only regret is that I never took a photo with her.
Oh, you didn't?
And it was in the moment. And that's, if I have any regret, that was my regret. And it was out of kind of listening to those around me and not listening to my inner soul.
Yeah.
And empathically feeling their fear of what that would look like and the judgment. And again, that's that very young empath acting, and also, trauma and all of that. I've chatted with photographers and doulas and midwives. If you can just keep it in the back of your mind that even if she says no, give her a little bit of time, talk with her, ask her to talk. And it's not to get her to change your mind, but she has to be sure that it's a no, because you can't do it over. You can't take him again.
I'm so glad you said that, because I haven't done that yet. And I want to do it justice and, be everything they need me to be.
At first, I didn't want pictures. I was like, I don't want pictures. And then it was like, no, I should have pictures. And this is all very quick. You're making these decisions like very, very quick, and a lot of pain and a lot of trauma. It's a war zone in this labor and delivery room, and what you're feeling in it. And then you're having to make hard decisions. The nurse, she very lightly just brought up ideas as to why I might want them. And she's like, you never even have to look at them. You never do. You can keep them on a CD and you don't ever have to look at them. But maybe when you're 80, you might, and you won't know that, and you won't have that. And so when she brought that into that, I still, because of a comment that was made by a family member, it stuck in my brain right then and there in that trauma space. And I I didn't take photos with her, which it's a regret, but it's not the hardest thing. But I wish I would have had a picture of me holding her, because it gives that realness that she was there.
And was yours, I would imagine. Yeah. Well, that's how I feel about the photos I do have of me and my mother. It's like proof that I had a mom, that I was loved, And when women who are overweight don't want to get in a photo, it breaks my heart, because their kids could care less what they weigh. Those pictures I have, their few pictures are so precious. And so I know how precious the photo can be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate you just sharing the whole story. I appreciate knowing, and I'm glad you're showing a better way of dealing with this.
When Teresa Caputo came to Spokane, I'd gone to the first show, and it was shortly after Isabella passed, and we sat so far away. I wasn't expecting anything, which didn't happen, but I just love being in the energy. It's very much in alignment with my thoughts. And then I was 8 months pregnant with Lily, and she came back. And so Jason surprised me with tickets. We sat very close. And as she walked by, she was like, "Who's lost a daughter?" And I had a reading right there with her. And it was so beautiful. I had maybe 10 girlfriends throughout the whole audience, and they'd seen me on this journey, and to see this culmination. And she looked at me and she said, "This is very interesting." And I could tell she was tiptoeing around the space of, reincarnation or continuation or whatnot. I think people are protective of that thought process. And she kind of tiptoed around it, but she looked at me, we're only like a foot apart. And she says, "I need you to know that her footprints are going to be the same. And I think you know what that means." Tears are just falling as I'm just looking at her. And I said, "Yeah, I do." And she's like, "You're very intuitive. You know what that means." And I said, "Yeah."
That's beautiful.
A girlfriend who was there, she also had a stillbirth, same way, same everything. She got me this beautiful bookmark, a silver bookmark, and engraved with her footprints will be the same.
Oh, so beautiful.
Just the abundance of miracles. And I think today I was kind of struggling today just with other stuff in life. And this was a helpful reminder of all the things that have gone right.
I'm so glad. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of See Beneath Your Beautiful, hosted by Hara Allison. And thanks for your ratings and reviews. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Stay tuned.